The Diaries of Heinrich Himmler reveal the darkest secrets of a disturbed mind. Within these pages, the sinister leader of the SS under Adolf Hitler's regime documented his ruthless ideology and destructive plans. Amidst his routine of extermination, trivialities intertwined, such as visits to the cinema or camaraderie lunches, all while meticulously planning the systematic elimination of millions of innocent lives. This chilling duality confirms what German philosopher Hannah Arendt described as the banality of evil, a malevolence that was not radical or extraordinary, but rather, as its name suggests, banal, in the sense of the incapacity to think critically and reflect on the moral consequences of actions. Prepare to delve into this new installment of military history and hear firsthand the intimate confessions of one of the most infamous architects of horror in history. Let us begin this chilling journey through the mind of a monster.
Pages from the diaries of Hitler's henchman Heinrich Himmler have been found in military archives in the Russian city of Podolsk. The previously unpublished extracts from the Nazi SS leader's journal reveal chilling details of Himmler's daily life, including what he referred to as a comradely lunch at Dachau concentration camp.
The discovery of Heinrich Himmler's intimate diaries by the Red Army after 1945 shook the corridors of power in post-war Germany. As historians meticulously scrutinized the documents, the true extent of his involvement in the Holocaust became horrifyingly clear. His meticulous records provided a damning account of his role in orchestrating the genocide of millions. With control over the concentration camp network and the Nazi domestic intelligence agency, Himmler wielded immense power and influence within the Third Reich. His personal texts chronicled every move, from strategic decisions to personal reflections, offering an unprecedented insight into the mind of a man consumed by hatred and ambition. The genocidal figure was born in 1900 in Munich into a devoutly Catholic family. His father was a distinguished teacher, and his godfather was Prince Heinrich of Bavaria. He studied agricultural engineering at university and worked on a chicken farm. By the age of 22, he was affiliated with the Nazi Party, and by 24, he had renounced Catholicism. His new affiliations included anti-Semitic racism and occultism, consistently obsessed with Aryan legends and the paranormal. Matthias Uhl, a historian and researcher at the German Historical Institute in Moscow working on Himmler's documents, emphasized the importance of the diary's discovery. Unlike other Nazi leaders, such as Joseph Goebbels, whose diaries only offered glimpses into the internal workings of the propaganda ministry, Himmler's meticulous record allowed for the reconstruction of key moments and decisions with unparalleled detail. Among the most chilling entries was the genocidal account of the infamous speeches in the Polish city of Posen, where he openly discussed the Holocaust in the presence of SS leaders. In one such declaration on October 4, 1943, the genocidal figure asserted, "Among ourselves it should be talked about openly, but we shall never speak of it in public. I mean the Jewish evacuation, the extermination of the Jewish people." The diary reveals that the speech was followed by a meal with prominent SS officers. Perhaps most disturbing of all were the first-hand accounts of visits to extermination camps and the indifferent observation of the horrors inflicted upon their prisoners. From the gas chambers of Sobibor to the streets of the Warsaw Ghetto, Himmler played an active role in directing the mass murder of Jews.
Heinrich Himmler creía de verdad en el nacionalsocialismo. No hay ninguna duda de que lo creía ciegamente. Estaba convencido de que había dos grupos diferentes, los arios, que eran superiores, y los inferiores.
The official diary of the Nazi regime's second-in-command was considered lost until 1990, when it was discovered in a special vault near Moscow. This archive was known for its collection of war records seized by the Red Army. Edited by scholars in 1999, the first part of the diary portrayed Himmler as the architect behind the initiation of the final solution to the Jewish question. This term referred to the planned murder of Jews, which extended beyond Europe and culminated in the Holocaust, as referred to by Jews. The genocide began in territories occupied by German forces and resulted in the deaths of 90% of Poles and 2/3 of the European Jewish population. Additionally, the Nazis had plans to expand their scope to the Middle East, including Jews from that region, as well as from the Tunisian island of Djerba and mainland France, transporting them to labor and extermination camps. The second part of the diary, edited in 1999 by Matthias Uhl, covered the records from 1943 to 1945. As the diary volumes were authenticated and prepared for publication, the world was shocked by the enormity of the crimes documented and their merciless coldness.
Nearly 1,000 pages of, quote, outstanding historical significance are now being studied by the German Historical Institute in Moscow, covering the years 1938, 1943, and 1944. The entries record the minutiae of Himmler's daily life.
Today is January 10, 1943, a typical Sunday in Himmler's life. After a nutritious breakfast, at 10:01 a.m., the leader undergoes a cranial massage with Dr. Kirsten, a seemingly benign break amidst his dark activities. At 12:50 p.m., Himmler enjoys a tender moment as the telephone rings at his home. It's Mammy, as he affectionately calls his wife. He also speaks with his daughter, whom he lovingly calls Poopy. As the afternoon arrives, Himmler immerses himself in typical Nazi leadership activities. He has lunch with SS commanders, a scene that appears ordinary within the power circles of the Third Reich. The true nature of his agenda is revealed around midnight when he orders the execution of 10 officers and the confinement of their families in concentration camps. This illustrates that routine self-care, leisure, and bureaucracy seamlessly accommodated routine murder within his schedule. On February 12, 1943, one of the most chilling episodes is recorded when Himmler visits the Sobibor extermination camp in Lublin, within occupied Poland. Accompanied by several officers, he arrives at the camp by train. During his stay, he witnesses a horrifying scene: the gassing of dozens of Jewish women and girls, part of the 400 detained in the camp. To improve the site's image, guards were prohibited from using clubs and whips during the visit. After observing the gassing, Himmler expresses satisfaction with what he has witnessed. In recognition, he promotes the camp's commander to the rank of SS captain. Later, he concludes the day with a banquet in the company of SS commanders from the detention center. Despite his involvement in the horrors of the Holocaust, Himmler carried with him a series of personal peculiarities. Among them, his stomach problems and a peculiar aversion to blood stand out. In August 1941, he nearly fainted when splattered with brain fragments during a mass execution. The details revealed so far by the diaries only confirm what was already known. Himmler was fully aware of the horrors of extermination. In one entry, the leader records a peculiar request for Auschwitz. He wanted dogs capable of attacking everyone except their handlers. The Nazi was a beast full of ominous contrasts, capable of ordering hundreds of murders in concentration camps during the day and attending an SS banquet at night. On one hand, he was the ruthless executor who planned the Holocaust, and on the other, he formed the sinister apex of the SS elite, caring for his family and friends. He took great care of his wife and daughter, as well as his affair with his secretary, Hedwig Potthast, who was 12 years his junior. In 1942, the couple had their first child, Helga, and to avoid a divorce scandal, Himmler confined Potthast to a house near Berchtesgaden, which they called Schneewinkelahen. Interestingly, while Himmler cultivated this image of a family man, he was also the architect of the final solution. By the summer of 1942, when his clandestine relationship with Potthast began, the systematic massacre of Jews was already in full swing. Despite his ruthless actions in the name of the regime, he continued to maintain romantic correspondence with Potthast, whom he affectionately called Bunny. In these letters, he detailed his successes in persecuting enemies of the German people, while asserting he had no right to enrich himself with personal items from victims, such as watches or coats. This duality between his personal life and his public atrocities is an example of the strange contrast that often characterized Nazi leaders. In 1944, Himmler's second daughter, Nanette Dorothea, was born from his relationship with Potthast. Regarding the nuances and paradoxes of his life, the niece of the Nazi leader, Katrin Himmler, described him as follows.
Tanto su familia como las SS describían a Heinrich como un hombre cariñoso y preocupado por los demás. Incluso decían que era muy bueno con los niños. Pero eso no lo convertía en una persona simpática, porque también tenía esa otra cara, severa, absolutamente implacable.
Himmler, in addition to his role in organizing and executing the Holocaust, was also directly involved in approving the atrocious medical experiments conducted on prisoners in Nazi concentration camps. These experiments, overseen by the infamous Angel of Death, Dr. Joseph Mengele, involved performing inhumane medical procedures and extreme tortures on individuals treated as mere objects of study. Prisoners were subjected to experimental surgeries without anesthesia, injections of toxic substances, exposure to extreme conditions of temperature and pressure, and other aberrant methods aimed at pushing the limits of the human body and developing techniques to enhance Nazi war machinery effectiveness. Himmler not only authorized these experiments, but also promoted them as part of the racist and ruthless ideology of the Third Reich. Excerpts from the Nazi leader's war diary detail the most sinister discourse in history. In total, we can say, "We have carried out this difficult task for the love of our people, and we have not suffered any defect within us, in our soul, or in our character." He then continues, without any scruples, discussing death toll figures.
Pero la mayor parte de ustedes sabe lo que son 100 cadáveres juntos, o 500, o 1000. Saben lo que es presenciarlo, y resistiendo a toda debilidad humana, mantenerse firme. Es una experiencia que nos ha endurecido, un logro del que nunca hemos hablado y del que nunca hablaremos.
What you just heard is a speech that Himmler delivered at a dinner with SS commanders. On March 9, 1938, Himmler recounts in his diary a lunch he describes as camaraderie at the Dachau concentration camp located near Munich. This center, the first established by the Nazi regime, would later become the site of the deaths of tens of thousands of people. The following day, as if they were routine visits or even outings, the genocidal figure documented a visit to the Sachsenhausen concentration camp on the outskirts of Berlin, accompanied by Joseph Goebbels, the master of Nazi propaganda. It is estimated that more than 30,000 people would die in that camp in total. Just 4 days later, the diary documents another visit, this time to the Buchenwald concentration camp in eastern Germany. During this day, the genocidal figure also shared a meal with local officials. That same evening, he traveled to Weimar, where he dined with Fritz Sauckel, the Nazi party leader in the region. Sauckel, who would later be executed for war crimes in Nuremberg, proposed that Himmler be the godfather of his son, which he gladly accepted. This event illustrates the web of personal and political relationships that the genocidal figure wove in his high-ranking Nazi position. On January 9, 1943, the leader was in Warsaw, where he visited the infamous ghetto, home to the largest number of Jews concentrated in Europe. Through his annotations, we can trace his itinerary from his arrival at the airport, through lunch at the security police casino, to his departure from the city at the end of the day. There was not a single mention of the unimaginable suffering endured by the people in the ghetto. The details revealed in the diary fill a crucial gap in academics' understanding of the Third Reich and its regime. They also demonstrate the enormous effort and dedication that Himmler and his SS devoted to the execution of defenseless people, even at a time when the Nazi regime was desperately fighting for survival in the war. The diary also records that on one occasion, the genocidal figure visited the SS Sonderkommando at the Dachau camp to evaluate the efficiency of diesel engine-operated gas chambers. These chambers, known as mobile gas chambers, were used to carry out mass executions of prisoners, especially during periods when new transports were not expected or when fixed gas chambers were overloaded. They operated similarly to fixed chambers, but their portability allowed for greater flexibility in the implementation of executions. Himmler's visit to Dachau to inspect these facilities demonstrates his direct commitment to the operation and improvement of the extermination methods used by the Nazi regime. His presence there, underscores the coldness and brutality with which Nazi leaders approached genocide. Additionally, his writings reveal the celebration of a banquet in his honor after these visits, where SS guards and officers were rewarded for their participation in the atrocities committed. But diaries were not the only findings. In 2014, almost 7 decades after Himmler's suicide, the German newspaper Die Welt gained access to hundreds of letters from the feared SS chief, recovered from a residence in Israel. These correspondences, mostly addressed to his wife Marga, span from 1927 until shortly before his death in 1945, when they fell into Allied hands. Alongside these letters, photographs and personal documents were recovered, their authenticity certified. The letters are signed with phrases like "Your Heine" or "Your Father," and their content is primarily loving and familial, though also displaying signs of anti-Semitism. Even in his most intimate moments, Himmler could not hide his entrenched Nazism. While these letters do not reveal details about his affiliation with the Nazi Party, they provide insights into the private life of the so-called architect of evil, including his long-term extramarital relationship with his secretary. Heinrich Himmler emerged as a criminal bureaucrat whose rise to power was marked by a perverse dream that guided his life and led him to commit unimaginable atrocities. This dream consisted of creating a world dominated by Aryan Germans, a world where there was no place for those they deemed inferior: Jews, Slavs, homosexuals, disabled individuals, and other groups categorized as human scum. Until very close to the end of the war, Himmler remained very confident of a German victory.
Nuestros enemigos deben saber que la invasión de Alemania, aunque pueda tener éxito en algunos lugares, tendrá para ellos un precio equivalente al suicidio nacional.
Before Hitler took his own life, Himmler betrayed the supreme leader. His fanaticism drove him to seek a second political career, even considering aligning with former enemies of the Nazi regime. However, this idea horrified the Allies, who rejected any attempt to cooperate with the architect of the Holocaust. In April 1945, Himmler met with representatives of the World Jewish Congress and asked Count Folke Bernadotte of the Swedish Red Cross to convey an offer of surrender to General Dwight D. Eisenhower. He tried to justify the atrocities committed in the extermination centers, arguing that the crematoria were necessary to combat an alleged typhus epidemic, and falsely claimed that the survival rate in the camps was high. However, these desperate and cynical maneuvers could not hide the true nature of his crimes or absolve him of responsibility for the genocide perpetrated under his command. All attempts failed, and upon learning of them, Hitler stripped him of all his positions. On May 22, 1945, British soldiers detained Himmler at a border checkpoint. His new shiny passport and nervous behavior gave him away. Himmler was sent to a camp for interrogation. The next day, he revealed his true identity. During a medical checkup, he suddenly bit into a hidden cyanide capsule in his mouth. 15 minutes later, he died from the poison. His body is currently buried in an unmarked grave in the Lüneburg Heath. In order to prevent the spread of rumors and possible veneration by Nazi followers, British soldiers took measures to document and preserve the hierarch's corpse. They photographed and filmed the body, and even created a death mask using plaster to obtain a lasting impression as additional evidence. All members of the barracks were taken to the room where the Nazi leader's body lay to witness the remains. A British intelligence officer, Guy Adderley, took a photograph of the corpse with his own camera. This image was intended to be sold by Adderley's relatives, but the auction was cancelled out of fear that the photograph would become a Nazi souvenir. Himmler's figure was never given a form of redemption. His role in the Holocaust was undeniably decisive, being the main architect of the Third Reich's extermination plans. His legacy of horror, recorded in his diaries, details all the infamy he perpetuated. Despite being afraid of blood, he was responsible for one of the most atrocious genocides in history. It's time to say goodbye. Thank you very much for staying until the end. We invite you to stay tuned to our channel so we can meet again in the next video.